another month has gone and we are now in April. So it's time to wrap up everything I read in March, and I actually had a pretty good reading month in terms of quantity digested, inhaled, read. Let's just go for read. I was trying to think of a clever word, but I don't have any. So I read 18 books in March, though 4 of them were short stories, so really 14. 3 of those were BookTube prize books. So if you're interested in my thoughts on the short stories, you need to check out my short story video. I will link it below. If you're interested in the BookTube prize books, that video will also be linked below. I won't talk about them here, with the exception of they'll be included in the star rankings situation. So I will wrap up 11 books for you today. So just a couple of little stats. I'm not going to go mad. Star rating wise, I had 1 2-star read, 7 3-star reads, 8 4-star reads, and 2 5-star reads. In terms of format, 11 of these books were audiobooks. So basically work has gone a bit mad, and I am in the car a lot, up and down the country to meetings and this, that and the other, which means I have a lot of time for audiobooks, not so much time for the other things. So yeah, 11 audiobooks, 3 ebooks and 4 physical books this month. In terms of genre, I shall put up my story graph thingy here. And the most read genres were sci-fi, but as I said, 4 of those were short stories. I don't know if I said they were sci-fi, but they were. 4 literary fiction, 4 historical, and then a smattering of other bits and pieces in there also. So let's talk about some books, shall we? The first book I finished was Network Effect by Martha Wells. This is a sci-fi. It's the 5th book in the Murderbot series, where we follow Murderbot as she invariably gets into some sort of trouble and saves some humans of some description from something terrible. I really enjoyed the first book in the series, All Systems Red. The second one was pretty good, and now I feel like I've read the same book 5 times. They're all novellas. Oh, actually, this one was a full-length novel. The other 4 were novellas, and the one that comes after this is a novella. And honestly, I feel like it's a bit of a swizz, because she's telling the same story in a novella and selling them at quite an expensive price. So yeah, I don't really see any character development happening anymore. From the first book and second book, yeah, okay, but not anymore. And like I say, the story seems to be more or less the same every time. So I'm done with this series. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. It did have me laughing in places. Murderbot is a very sarcastic character, and I like that, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So yeah, I'm finished with this series. The second book I read was We Have Always Been Here by Samra Habib. This is a non-fiction memoir of Samra's life as she grows up in, I believe it's Pakistan. I read this right at the beginning of the month. And her sort of experiences there, and then as they move to Canada when the religious situation becomes quite unstable. I thought this was a very good memoir. I thought it was well written. I thought it was engaging. Samra Habib goes on in this memoir to discuss her journey becoming queer and understanding what that means and what that means to her and what that means to her family and her religion. And I thought that was all very, very well done. It was a solid memoir, 4 stars. The next book I read was for the middle grade March readathon, and I read George by Gino. This book has actually now changed title and is called Melissa, because in this we are following a young trans girl. Her name is George, but her name to herself is Melissa. And we see her struggling. She's in primary school, struggling to understand her identity and who she is. and how to convey that to the people around her, her family, her teachers, her friends. And at the school they are doing a play of Charlotte's Web, and she wants to play Charlotte, and it's about sort of the fallout that comes from her wanting to play that role and how she copes with that, and her friendship with her best friend, which is just really heartwarming. And I think this is a fantastic children's book. It really highlights what it is to be trans, and throughout the book Melissa is referred to as she, even though other characters may be referring to her as a he, and it sort of starts the conversation on pronouns, I suppose, at a level that is understandable for primary school age children, which I thought was fantastic to see. I actually gifted this book to my son's primary school a couple of months ago in an attempt to get them to read more diversely, and yeah, lovely writing, brilliant story. I absolutely loved it, gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read Cultish by Amanda Montell, and this is a non-fiction book looking at really the language around what is a cult, what constitutes a cult, what makes people buy into cults, and I thought it was fascinating. She does talk about some major cults that are in history and still running today, which I thought was all very well done, but all the focus is on the language that these cults use and how they use that to hook people in, and what sort of people are pulled in based on that language, and how it's not all the same sort of person, and not, yeah, it was, I really recommend it actually. I found it really informative, educational, interesting, and well structured as well, so that you can follow it through. It follows different types of cults in different chapters, from sort of like the more negatively publicised ones, should we say, through to stuff like Avon. So yeah, really enjoyed it. It was definitely worth a read. The next book I finished, somewhat belatedly, was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. So this is the first book in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy, where, shock horror, we follow Thomas Cromwell, and in this one we're really seeing his rise to power in Henry VIII's court, where he starts from. So we do see a little bit of his childhood and how he moves from being a blacksmith's son to one of the most powerful men in England, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed this book. It is clearly very, very well researched. There is a lot of detail in here, but I loved the character of Cromwell. I thought he was masterfully done. You really get a sense of what is driving him, what his motivations are, and those motivations are relatable to a bog standard person. His feelings for his family come through a lot in this. The writing style takes a little bit of getting used to. She refers to Cromwell as he a lot, and sometimes it can get a bit confusing when there's more than one male character in a room and she's referring to more than one person as a he. But to be honest, once I sort of got into the flow, I didn't really have a problem with that at all. It is what I would call hardcore historical fiction. It's very dense, it has a lot of detail in, but that's what elevated this for me. Yeah, I gave this 4 stars. There was a bit of filler in this. I don't think it really needed to be 650 pages long. We'll see if I have the same comment when I read the third one, which is like 800 pages long. But yeah, absolutely love this. If you have an interest in the Tudor period and historical fiction, I would highly recommend this book. The next book I finished was the final revival of Opal and Neb by Dawnie Walton. This book follows a young woman who's an editor of a magazine. Her father died when he was playing drums for a musical duo, Opal and Neb, at a concert during a riot at a concert. And she is tasked with writing this book, interviewing the various people involved, and in the lead up to a revival concert of Opal and Nip. So this was written in editor's notes and emails and transcripts and all multimedia stuff. That's fine, I quite like that. But this book just didn't do it for me. I read Daisy Jones and the Six a couple of years ago, and I think a lot of people are comparing the two. And for me, Taylor Jenkins Reid with Daisy Jones did this concept better. The running it as a series of interviews, it ran better in Daisy Jones and the Six. And I think maybe one of the reasons for that is because you had bigger sections from each character. A lot of this, you'd have like one line from Opal and one line from her sister and then one line from Opal, and it just all the way through. I also didn't find the narrative super engaging. It was quite slow. The pacing was just off for me. The story in itself should have been really interesting, but the way it was written just didn't work for me. I felt quite bored quite a lot of the time. There was like a moment in the middle, which I did go at, but then it sort of didn't build from that. It sort of did it and then it went for me personally. So I gave it 3 stars. It was readable enough. The audiobook was very good, full cast narration, but yeah, not great. But moving from that to one that was great, Lonesome Dove by Hilary McMurtry. Oh, I love this book so much. I have talked about this quite a lot. I talked about it in a tag earlier in the week, and I did a live with Carrie last week. But this was a 5-star read. This is a historical fiction set in the west of the US, when we have a group of cowboys, the Hat Creek outfit, move a herd of cattle from Texas to Montana, and we see what happens to them in the process. This is absolutely a character-led book, really. We follow multiple characters, and we're not just with Hat Creek the whole time. We do follow some side characters, and I loved every second of it. I thought all the characters were fantastically done. I fell in love with a lot of them. I hated some of them, and I can't wait to pick up the next one in the series, which me and Carrie are going to read towards the end of the summer. Yeah, beautifully written, really accessible as well. This is a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, and I always think of those as a bit too highbrow for me, but man, anyone could read this. The writing is beautiful, but it pulls you into the story and it pulls you along, and there is always enough momentum to keep you engaged, which is no small feat for a book of 950 pages. Just saying. The next book I read was another buddy read, which I read with a lovely subscriber, Sonia. So thanks, Sonia, for reading this with me, because it required some discussion as we went through, and that is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. So this is a classic, and in this we follow Humbert as he grooms and abuses a 12-year-old girl, Lolita. So the first thing I would like to address is on the back of this book, it says, "There is no funnier monster in modern literature than poor doomed Humbert." Maybe I'm not intelligent enough for this book, because at no point did I find this humorous. I was disgusted with Humbert's behaviour, attitude. I don't see how any of this was funny. I also thought that the first half was significantly better than the second half. Nabokov does have a very interesting writing style. We are reading from the perspective of Humbert, in this. So you're reading from the perspective of a paedophile, which is obviously not going to float everybody's boat, but I thought it was an interesting perspective to read from. He is very much trying to convince the reader that what he did wasn't that bad, and obviously as a balanced, sane person, you know that what he's doing is very bad, but he continually tries to convince you that oh yeah but and that was really well done in the first half. Then we get to the second half and it comes off the rails a bit for me. I think the way I phrased it when me and Sonia were talking about it was Nabokov is flexing his literary muscles. He's trying to show off, and I don't like that in a book. I just want to be told the story, and there were big sections that dragged for me that were quite boring, particularly when he was talking about like a road trip and he was talking about all these places he'd been and he was just listing them off in like this really long paragraph, and I just so the first half of this book was 4 stars for me. The second half was 3 stars. I'm going to give it an overall 3, because actually I struggled with some of the things that Humbert did in the second half. I didn't think they were right for his character. But yeah, I'm glad I read it. It was definitely interesting, definitely thought-provoking and discussion creating. Yeah. But yeah, 3 stars. Yeah. The next book I finished was another buddy read, and that was The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, which I read with the lovely Rosie Cockshut. So in this book, we are in Ireland at the time when the First World War or the Second World War is happening, and the Spanish flu, Spanish influenza is rife. And we follow a young midwife, Julie, as she works in a maternity ward with women who are pregnant and have the flu, the Spanish flu. I couldn't put this book down. This book sucks you in so much. You have to know what's going to happen. It's so fast moving. It's quite short, and I could have read more. I can understand why Emma Donoghue made it shorter, because it does just intensify in your mind what's happening. But I thought it was exceptional. I loved it. I don't really want to tell you too much about it because I think that's the joy of this book. I went in completely blind. I didn't know anything apart from that it was about a midwife and the flu. And yeah, it did not take long to get through, and I gave it 5 stars. I really, really loved it. The next book I finished was for my in real life book club that I do with 2 of my very good friends, and I read Anxious People by Frederick Backman. So in this, we are following a cast of characters who are being held hostage after a failed bank robbery, who were all at a apartment viewing. So we follow the perspectives of these people who are held hostage, and the bank robber and the police. And I was surprised at how funny this was. It was really quite comical, and I really liked the presentation of it. A lot of it is told in the interview room at the police station after the hostages are released, and it's a little bit slapstick. It's not super true to what it's not like a real life crime situation, you know, none of these things would happen in real life, but it was really funny, but it had a lot of social commentary on what loneliness is and mental health issues and friendships and romances, and there was just a lot in this book which was really well covered, and I did shed a little tear at several places in the ending sections, and I thought it was really well done. And I was surprised because I am possibly the only person in the world who did not really like Beartown by this author. I thought it was fine. It didn't set my world on fire. So I went into this a little bit trepidatious, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really good. And the last book I read in March was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. So I listened to this on audiobook after Alice had said she'd just read it on audiobook and that the audiobook was really good and creepy. And it was a really good audiobook, and it was really creepy. I've never read Neil Gaiman before. So this was my first time reading him, and I've never seen the movie of Coraline, so I went in completely blind into this, just on the basis that Alice said it had creepy music. So in this we follow a young girl, Coraline, who is living in sort of a apartment building thing with her parents, and in one of the rooms there's a door that leads to another world, sort of thing. I didn't love this book. It was too weird for me. That said, if you enjoyed something like Alice in Wonderland, which also was just too weird for me, then this book will be right up your alley. It was just too much weird. But it was enjoyable enough. I gave it 3 stars. The audiobook was very well produced and narrated by Neil Gaiman himself. But yeah, it just wasn't my jam. I don't really have loads of negative comments about it, because it was just a personal preference that sort of style wasn't for me. And that is it, guys. That's 11 books. If you are interested in seeing my reviews for the BookTube prizes, BookTube prize books that I read this month, I'll leave it. You can check that out here. If you're interested in seeing the reviews of the short stories I read, I will leave that here. And yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, if you agree or disagree. I love a bit of a debate, so let me know in the comments, and I will see you very soon with another one. Bye.